I can't fix anything if I don't know it's wrong. So, and even if you kind of tell patients or you ask patients before you prescribe the medication, what are the three biggest things that you're worried about with starting this medication? So that can kind of help guide the treatment plan too. If I know that you don't have, a lot of
Oh, I
anxiety.
gotta go. I've been working, told them please don't hit my phone. I'm in my zone, bruh, just leave me alone. Was on the road, but I swear I'm coming home. Now the drinks on me, I think we need a toast. See, I did it for me. Now my old friends calling, told them nothing's for free. Told me time is money, dog, swear I paid all my fees. I was starving for this game, now my family can eat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cup of Nurses podcast with your hosts, Peter and Matt. We are two nurses on a mission to change this world, one conversation at a time. So let's jump right into it. If you find value in this show and want to join us on this mission, please share and review the show. It would mean absolutely everything to us. cupofnurses.com for all the info, latest updates of what we're up to, and any of our merch releases. For our conscious movement and our lifestyle podcast, you can check out wearefrontlinewarriors.com.
In this episode, we would like to introduce you to Morgan Murray. Morgan Murray is a board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioner from Baltimore, Maryland. Morgan has been a travel nurse since 2014 and has traveled all across the United States. She currently owns a private mental health practice and works as a private contractor. She also is the co-author of So You Want to Be a Nurse, a how-to guide for success in nursing, travel nursing, and opening up your own practice from A to Z. We talk about the roles of a psych NP and how mental health issues are treated. Thank you, Morgan, for being here. Thank you so much for your time. Can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself and your nursing career and how you became a psych nurse practitioner?
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name's Morgan. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So first, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and in Baltimore we have some of like the biggest, I think, psych facilities or the best. Some of the best, in my opinion, treatment options like Johns Hopkins, like Shepherd Pratt. So, like in my nursing career, I kind of like heard about it, kind of growing up as a nurse. And then once I started to work and I graduated, I actually didn't even know what a psych nurse practitioner was until I worked with one. And she told me all the things that she was able to do. And she was basically a travel NP. And she was basically living my dream. And I was like, you know what? I want to do that. So I did some research. I found a school, a really good school, and kind of like the rest was history. So
Did you get into travel NP as well?
So yeah, I did a couple travel MP assignments. Now, one thing I will say is that currently I'm not on contract, and I kind of like having like the stability of like being able to stay home and work because definitely from the travel psych MP side, a lot of the clinics want you to be able to come in person, and I'm not really ready to do that yet. So.
And when you were a nurse, were you a travel nurse or did you work somewhere as a staff?
Yeah, I did both. So I graduated in 2013. I'm old. I'm an old nurse, OG. And I graduated in 2013, and then I got my year of experience, and then I started traveling. So I've done both. I've had PRN jobs while I was still doing travel contracts. I've done rapid responses. I've done strikes. So I've done a lot of different things in travel nursing too.
How is that transition from an RN to now a psych nurse NP? How has your day-to-day changed, or can you touch a little bit about school, how different school is versus nursing school?
Yeah, I think that school for NPs is so much more self-directed than nursing school. And I think that as far as the clinical situations, when you are in NP school, when you get to clinical, it is not like you are learning anything. You're just basically practicing, demonstrating that you already know the knowledge, and the preceptor is just there just to make sure you don't kill anybody. That's pretty much it. So there is a huge difference between, your process as a student, as a nurse, as opposed to your process as a student NP.
And how has your day-to-day stuff changed? Because being a nurse and now nurse practitioner, you're more of less of the hands-on care, you could say, and more of dictating where care should go, asking questions, doing more of like a physician's role in a sense, right?
Yeah, so my job now is definitely more patient oriented and time oriented than task oriented. So I like that, when you're a nurse, nursing is a 24-hour job. So whatever you don't get done on your shift is going to be done by the next shift. But the problem is that I am responsible for everything with my patients. I have to do everything. So there isn't, passing the buck off to another provider. There isn't anyone else who really can do my job except for me. So that's the thing that I feel like is the most different. So again, my day-to-day is different because I'm now doing telehealth and outpatient. And as a nurse, I did inpatient. I did some outpatient and case management stuff, but now I don't have to, drive into work. So I do have shorter days, but I work more days now than I worked as a nurse. So I don't like to work really long hours because it's technically kind of mentally draining. So I find myself kind of splitting up my days into like 5 and 7 hour max days.
That's awesome. You get to cultivate your own schedule based on how you want to do things. And are you working private practice now?
Yeah. So I do work in private practice now. I have my own private practice, and I contract out with other contractors, other places who need psych services.
Are you able to do that just as an NP, or do you have to have like a doctor or somebody above you to own your own private practice?
Well, that's a good question. So this is something interesting, like especially this is Maryland specific, but anyone can own a private practice. And there's a lot of people in Maryland who actually own outpatient mental health clinics that are not clinicians themselves, not nurses, doctors, anything. The only thing that you need is that you need credentialed and qualified staff in order to be in a particular, setting and running the thing. So like with outpatient mental health clinics, anyone could open one, but you need to have a medical director. And what state you're in basically decides who can be that medical director. So in Maryland is full practice. So I can be a medical director in Maryland, and I have. But you have other states like California, like New York, that are not autonomous practice. They did for the state of emergency for COVID, but they went back. So it really depends on what state you're in, what you can do, and then what people you need in play.
So you have your own patients. For example, if one of your patients ends up going to the ED for some psychological issues or SI or anything like that, are you then required to also show up in the ED and figure out what's going on? How does that process go?
No. We are definitely not required. So if you're a nurse practitioner or a physician or PA, you would have to have privileges to be able to treat a patient at any facility or any hospital. So sometimes, like I think I've gotten maybe 2 calls like throughout my career where my patients were admitted, and for the most part, the providers in the ED will try to get all the information that they need from the patients. They typically won't call me or any other provider unless they're really stumped, but they're trying to understand like a course of action, or if there's like information missing. There's a lot of information they can access. Like they can access med lists, all types of things in the ED. So I've only gotten 2 of those calls before.
Okay.
So as a private practice, do you have your own set of patients you check up on, you follow up in like a regular practice, or is it something subcontracted where you're working for this company, you see these patients, you're done with it, you close the books and you don't think about it again?
No, so these are patients that are my patients that have been sourced through the contractor. Yeah. So unfortunately, no, I can't close the books and not forget about them, and forget about them. Like even when I go on vacation, even though I might not be seeing patients, there's things that I'm constantly doing. So sometimes I leave my paperwork until vacation. So
It's an interesting perspective because, for example, as a travel nurse, when I say close the books, you just turn off the light switch. You're not thinking about healthcare, patients, and you're coming back to work, and more than likely it might be a different assignment, and you're just starting fresh.
Yeah, it's not like that. It's not like that. But a lot of my patients I've seen for a long time, so it's nice to have some continuity. But I think that with the pandemic, we've seen a huge increase in mental health needs. So we also have a ton of new patients and initial visits, people who are trying to establish care. So,
and then when a new patient comes in, what are your role and responsibilities? Do you ask them certain questions, figure out what kind of medication they would need, or is it more of like a psychoanalytical approach where you're almost like a psychiatrist trying to figure out where their problems are? How does that all work?
Yeah, so most psych MPs work doing med management. You can do therapy if you'd like, but it's typically not a really cost-effective model for a lot of businesses or sustainable. So when patients come to me, I do a full psychiatric initial evaluation, which goes through a lot of things like if they've ever been suicidal, homicidal, what medications they've been on in the past. We go through, we look at the dosages of those medications, if it was effective, if it gave them side effects. And then, after we go through the evaluation, we talk about what the plan is going to be. I educate every single patient, even if they decide to not take medication, because we talk about what diagnosis I came to, how did I come to that diagnosis, what are certain side effects they could possibly expect in this medication, and what's the course of action. So a lot of times I see a lot of patients just not knowing what's the goal for treatment, like what is supposed to be better now that wasn't before, and is this medication, like, am I just going to be on this for like the rest of my life, or how long do we think that you're going to be on this? So it's a lot of different moving parts as far as how you treat new patients.
What population are you taking care of mostly?
Oh, I only do adults. I don't do children. I don't do kids.
Okay, it's interesting because I've talked to the pediatrics nurse that said after the pandemic, she's seen a lot of suicidal ideation patients, and everything changed, which made her left pediatrics. So like in your case, pre versus post everything that happened, what are some relevant mental health issues that keep populating, and how has that changed post pandemic?
So I've seen a lot of patients self-diagnosing from TikTok. I've seen a lot of that. I've also seen, and this is like the trend that I'm seeing even in like the nursing field. I'm seeing a lot of substance use. There have been so many different, not only just DEA busts, but also a lot of nurses have been found to have, basically have drug problems. And it's sad, it's disheartening, but there are some real struggles that people are going through, and just masking them with medications or whatever they think that will work. So those are the big issues that I see.
What do you mean by self-diagnosing from TikTok? What?
So I'll see a lot of patients that have seen like or follow certain creators on TikTok, and some of these creators all of them are not licensed as mental health professionals. But there's a lot of people who educate people, the general public, on mental health that are not licensed or certified to do so. Some of the information is misleading and wrong. Some of it is right, but I've seen a lot of it. And I think it's great because it is helping reduce the stigma of mental illness, to talk about it more. But I just think that we have to tread very carefully when discussing things that can make people think that they have something that they don't. So.
And real quick, and then do you see like nurses giving this misinformation, you kind of say, or just other people giving this kind of false information to other people?
Oh, they're not nurses.
Okay.
They're just like the general public.
Okay.
And it's funny because there was a research study that showed that now this new generation, they're using TikTok and Instagram more for search versus Google. So kind of it's funny that now, hey, there's this TikTok issue that people are self-diagnosing. And it's funny you also talked about nurses and this drug issue because we had previous guests and we mentioned how nurses carry a lot of trauma with them and how that carries over to work.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah.
Based on the current health model that you see, in your opinion, to have a better healthcare system in the psychiatric sphere, what do you think should change in that business model?
Medication needs to be affordable. I think that's the biggest issue that I see. Um, it's just interesting because Mark Cuban had apparently developed this business that they're going to be able to develop medications for lower costs, and what they're able to charge for some of like the medications that we regularly prescribe is absolutely groundbreaking. So I think that medication needs to be affordable. We already have inflation and all these issues with our economy, a possible recession that no one is, saying that we actually have. So being able to afford the medication that you actually need, I think chef's kiss.
Yeah, I watched a video with him. I think he was on the Nelk Boys, and they were talking about this whole pharmaceutical industry. And what he said is why the drugs are so expensive and why they are expensive for such a long time is because some of these companies, when they find a use case for it, they put a patent on it, right? So let's just say a medication works very well for bipolar. So they patent it for bipolar. And then before that patent runs out, they do trials and show that it's also helpful for schizophrenia. So now that's a new patent. So it basically they flip-flop from issue to issue, and that's how these patents stay relevant for such a long time. And some of these medications don't get put out onto like the public market until 30, 40, 50 years down the line after it's been used so much on like these different issues. So my question to you is, since you work with you could say big pharma more than us nurses, is how effective are psychiatric medications? Because I read a lot of articles saying that SSRIs and things like that are only effective in like 50% of patients. Is that kind of true or no?
Well, I haven't seen that study. I would love to see it. But what I base my practice on, and I know I'm a broken record, but I say this all the time. My practice is based off of science and evidence. That's the only way that I can function. So for me, the SSRIs and SNRIs are our first lines of treatment when looking at psychiatric illnesses. But you have to understand that psych is so different from other forms of medicine, and that we're one of the newest forms of specialty. So we're not an exact science. And a lot of what we do in psychiatry is an art. There really is an art of prescribing. That's why I really love what I do, because you can kind of tell when a provider has been in psych for a long time, because it's like they know the medications at the back of their hand. So, SSRIs might not work initially for 50% of the population, but did that percent of the population max out the effective dose when they were prescribed it? What did they start at? If it was Lexapro, how heavy was the patient? Did they start at 10 milligrams or did they start at 5? So there's so many things that, when people tell me that a medication didn't work, it kind of like starts the wheels turning in my head, because I know that there's so many things that can happen when prescribing a medication, and it's not necessarily that the medication did anything. So
how about the side effects? I also heard that a lot of these medications have fairly common adverse side effects. I can't recall off the top of my head what those are. And a few other studies that I looked into also show that a lot of people why they're not being effective, these SSRIs and other psych meds, is because of side effects, which then lead to patients coming off by themselves and not taking them anymore. So then do you also combine your pharmaceutical therapies with also like psychoanalysis? Do you also point them to like a psychologist so they can also talk about the problems, not just medications?
Absolutely. So the problem is I can't make grown patients do anything. Yeah. Okay. A lot of times these people don't want to do therapy along with medication management, but absolutely. The gold standard of treatment for most of our illnesses in psych are going to be medication and therapy together. So I absolutely do that. The main side effects with SSRIs, and I love again this part of like education and talking about pharm. So you got to look at serotonin. So serotonin is typically housed in our gut. So when you're like flooding the body with more serotonin, it makes sense that it makes you nauseous or makes you almost want to vomit. So for a lot of patients, some of these side effects are tolerable, but they're also annoying. And then you start to get into side effects like sexual side effects and, having it more difficult to reach an orgasm or, not having the urge to, engage in sexual intercourse with your partner. And that can be a really big issue. But I think the key is that you need to maintain an open relationship with your patients to be able to talk about it, because I can't fix anything if I don't know it's wrong. So, and even if you kind of tell patients or you ask patients before you prescribe the medication, what are the 3 biggest things that you're worried about with starting this medication? So that can kind of help guide the treatment plan too. If I know that you don't have, a lot of anxiety and, you're telling me, look, I can't deal with any sexual changes and I cannot deal with weight gain. Like those are my 2 biggest things. I'll say, okay, cool. I think maybe we should start with Wellbutrin then, instead of maybe Prozac or something else. So there's so many things that you can do when you're honest and upfront with your provider about the things that you're like, I'm not going to do that.
And you mentioned serotonin being derived from the gut. So then how important is diet and exercise? Because I feel like sometimes you might be able to counter effect those adverse effects by taking a change in your diet and maybe optimizing the gut, and you might be able to take a less dose of Lexapro because you're eating healthy, you're doing all this, and now you're maybe producing more serotonin or whatever that is. And also, especially with guys, if you have low libido or you're scared for like the adverse sexual effects, maybe you could just go to the gym. Maybe you might be able to build up more testosterone and you might counterbalance those. So do y'all focus on diet and exercise?
Well, diet and exercise is important, but as far as like how it kind of guides the prescription, how does it guide the medication management is a little bit different. Funny enough, some of the biggest factors are going to be smoking. And if the patient smokes or not, that's probably going to be one of the biggest things. And then also for prescribing, especially when you're looking at the psychotic disorders, the biggest thing I'm going to look at is the patient's overall health status. Not if they want to work out, but how are they actually working out? Because there are a lot of medications that we could put people on that can make things worse. So unless I know that the patient like knows the risk, and all of our psych meds, every single medication on the planet has a side effect, possibly. But as long as the patient is able to understand and be aware of what those side effects are, I'm cool with it. Because like as a practitioner, I've had patients who have had like a seizure disorder. And that if you prescribe someone like a stimulant or a medication that lowers their seizure threshold, that there's a good chance that medication could make them have a seizure. But, looking at the history, talking to the patient, they're like, well, it's either, I get fired from my job or I take the medication that I need. So, you really had to leave that up to the patient. And I think that patients are kind of more aware of than what we, give them credit for. So I kind of put the ball in my patient's court a lot of times, honestly.
Yeah, you have to, because change starts from within, and if they're not willing to change and put in effort, then that's gonna reflect on also the care that they get.
Yeah, I'm only the girl with the license. That's what I tell them. That's all I'm here for. So
yeah, straight business.
Yeah.
What does a perfect patient look like when they're both into therapy and psychiatric drugs? How long does it usually take for them to transition? Let's just say they have depression, they hit rock bottom, they're on meds, they're getting therapy. What does the perfect transition look like where they get off their meds and continue their life?
I don't think there's a perfect patient. I think that every single patient, and in psych, we have to realize that when a patient is without symptoms and symptom free, even if they're taking their medications, that's success to us. That's you moving on in the continuum and you being okay. So I have patients that have been on their psychiatric medications for a very long time. There isn't much that can possibly change with certain disorders, but other disorders like depression, or anxiety, yes, it might, that patient might reach a point where they've gotten all their coping skills, they've done the work in therapy, and they've gotten to a good place. It might be possible that they discontinue their medications. I haven't seen many patients with psychotic disorders or bipolar disorder, honestly, get off of their medication without having serious consequences, like having another worsened readmission. So,
Got it. So like for the less severe psychotic cases, let's just maybe stick with depression and anxiety. Do you ever have patients that are like, "Hey Morgan, I've been on this medication for 6 months. I actually feel very happy. Do you recommend me maybe getting off this medication?"
yeah, I've had a patient say that they wanted to get off the medication, titrated the person down, and they had one of the worst suicidal ideations they had had. Yeah.
So not titrating down meds, huh?
No. Again, that you so I look at patients almost like you would a relationship. Every single patient is different, and you can't judge one patient or how you move through your course with other patients based on that one encounter, unless it was evidence-based practice that you found, and there was something like a sentinel event that happened. I don't judge other patients from what happened with one patient. So that was just a relapse, and I'm still going to be there for them. I still fit the patient in for an emergency appointment to get them started on meds. So I'm not heartless. So I want my patients to do better. I want them to graduate and go away from me, and I love them from a distance. And I love that for them. But whether they're here or not, I'm going to support them.
Do you work with patients that have ADHD or anything like that? Yeah.
Yep.
Is it prevalent? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, going through college, like everybody that went through college, I feel like 90% of people that I talk to have done Adderall or something similar while they're in college. So I'm curious now, does that also transition back into their adulthood now? Do you see a lot of patients with ADHD, or is it just like you could say a temporary drug that teenagers, or not teenagers, but people in their 20s use it to get past college when they need a little bit of extra energy, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I have quite a few patients that have ADHD, but what I think we are kind of going through currently is, with the stigmas that have been attached to ADHD and mental health for so long, we're kind of trying to get to a point where we're like, were you not treated because your parents didn't believe in it, or were you not treated because you weren't having the symptoms? So we really have to kind of use discernment. And I think that the US is getting into a crisis because we have pharmacies that are running out of stimulants. So I think it's been a lot of things going on in the US. So there's definitely been a lot of ADHD though, for sure.
How are you able to tell if someone actually has ADHD? Because some people that I know, they're on Adderall, and I'm gonna tell you, I have more ADHD than they do, and I'm not on anything. And they told me it's so easy to get it. All you gotta do is talk to your doctor, present these symptoms, tell them this is how you're feeling, and then they got the prescription. Which, I mean, I understand is not a good way to get it, and I don't blame the physicians for doing this, because when somebody comes to you complaining about these symptoms, you're not gonna tell them that they're lying or whatever. It's easy to bypass. Right. So how do you kind of vet those kind of patients?
So you still do a psych initial evaluation. I feel like my assessment skills are A1, so I can use good discernment and a little bit of common sense to see when someone's trying to jack my chain. But as far as patients, like I just operate from a space where I just give people the benefit of the doubt, and I listen to them, I hear them. But a lot of times with how ADHD has kind of changed is that I have to do a kind of like more thorough assessment as to where things started in their childhood. But it's just like with any other disorder or disease in psych, you just look at the diagnostic criteria and, you treat.
Mm-hmm.
So
How do you take care of yourself when it comes to mental health and everything? Because you're so deep into the field, I'm sure it drains you emotionally too. What's your go-to self-care routine?
So I'm in therapy, and I think every every psychiatric provider should be in therapy. If your therapist does not have a therapist, run.
Noted.
Yes. Yes. Also, so I have two things that I do for self-care. So first, I love spa days. I go to the spa almost every month, and I was in Turkey when y'all first emailed me. So the whole month of June, I was just like trying to get to a hammam. Like I did it 3 times, and I'm actually going back to Turkey again. And I made an appointment just at the hammam because I was like, I have to go. So yeah, like that's my first thing. So my other thing I do for self-care is travel. And that's been an amazing thing. Just because with COVID and not being able to kind of go anywhere, I'm kind of getting back outside of my travel shell. So I'm starting to do the far trips again. So I'm excited about that.
What's your favorite place you traveled to? Is it Turkey?
I think Bali. I think Bali would probably be my favorite. Bali or Thailand, like hard Thai.
Why? Matt and I are actually going to Thailand. We're going to Phuket for 3 months.
Oh, okay.
What drew you to Thailand so much?
So, I love the food. The food was so good. Thailand was just a vibe. I liked that it was pretty cheap, as far as being able to afford things, doing things. Because me and my girlfriends, we booked a yacht day. We did a lot of things, and your money goes really far out there, so that we can stay out there longer. But the people are nice. There's a really, really nice movie theater too. I can't remember the name of it, but I loved it. It was so nice, and they had like silk sheets and everything on the bed. They had like personal butlers who brought you everything. It was so nice.
What? That's awesome. That's wild.
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch it up here. So I know you also co-authored a book. What got you into writing a book, and what are you passionate about when it comes to helping nurses?
Oh, okay. So I wrote the book because I felt like I kept getting the same questions, like people who wanted nursing advice, or people who said, okay, I want to be a nurse, where do I start? So I kind of like compiled the most popular questions, and I just started writing. And I actually had went to my nurse practitioner, who is now my business partner, and I was like, Theo, we got to do X, Y, Z. And he's just been around for all of my crazy ideas. So we're kind of stuck with each other. But yeah, so that's kind of what like fostered us to write the book, especially, the first one, So You Want to Be a Nurse. But our second ebook, it's funny because we wrote that before we got into the financial situation that we're in now, like with this crisis. And we talked about like our own portfolios, what we were doing. At that point, I had made the most amount of money off of my brokerage account. And it's been a total change. I mean, granted, we're still doing really, really well. We haven't really lost money, but I mean, we just know that there are so many people who are, especially like nurses, healthcare workers, who are just like, okay, well, we're in a bad position. We're not in a great boat. So how do we get to a place that we feel comfortable?
And you studied under some financial experts. What was your biggest takeaway from those people? What have you learned about your finance?
So I learned, number one, that I need to be investing early and regularly. And you can't predict what's going to happen in 6 months, in 3 months. You just have to just keep going in. So, not trying to really time the market has kind of been the best strategy for me. And I've kind of been able to maintain some regularity in my own portfolio by not really acting on impulse. Because, a lot of people, when we get to a financial crisis, they're like, oh my God, let me pull all my money out. And I'm like, that's the opposite of what you need to do. So I think for me, just kind of like setting my, my 401, my 401k, setting my Roth IRA, like all of all of my investments and just making them on a regular schedule and just not looking at it has been probably one of the best things too.
Yeah, definitely, especially after this downturn. So do you just do the 401k stuff, or do you also do maybe some other investments on the side? Like, do you maybe do real estate, or do you do maybe your personal stocks, anything like that?
Mm-hmm. So, as far as so I have a brokerage account where I day trade. So I do that. I haven't really been doing it, honestly, with the market being how it is. So, I mean, I do have that. I have my Roth IRA, and I have a set 401k because I own my company. So when I get paid, I'm getting paid as a 1099 contractor. So I'm really not making any money until I actually pay myself from payroll. So I'm able to kind of get quite a lot of an added benefit doing things that way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you mentioned day trading. I used to day trade a little bit back, like when cryptocurrency was back on the rise. I did a lot of.
You did it on Binance?
Yeah, I used to do on Binance. Back in the day. Yeah, I don't do as much anymore just because it's a lot easier to day trade when it's an uptrending economy. Because shorting stuff is a little bit more difficult, you could say. But I guess if it's a downturn economy, you're better off shorting and stuff like that. But I don't really day trade anymore. I do more of if I do stocks, I do stocks for longevity. If I do crypto, that's something for longevity as well now. But what I recently got into is Forex, and that's basically like currencies. And I don't really day trade. I do more of like weekly trading where I kind of look at the metrics and stuff. And that's been going pretty good so far. But yeah, nurses, it's interesting because nurses, they make a good amount of money, and sometimes they don't know what to do with it. And a lot of times, so it's very beneficial for nurses to get started into like investments like beyond the 401k route, because 401k just because 401k just taking money out of your check and someone else is doing that for you. But if you could maybe also invest and get like you do, like get a different brokerage firm to do it for you and maybe be a little bit more active, you could stretch your money really, really far for sure.
Yeah. I just didn't really want to get into real estate right now, which I think is kind of like for obvious reasons. The interest rate is so high. And I'm not really interested in buying a property in cash right now, but I think that because Maryland and Baltimore is becoming so gentrified, like this is probably one of the best times to be able to do it and have more opportunities. The city has so many different incentives going, like basically begging people to buy these houses and put money into them.
So that's actually very interesting, because if the government's begging you to buy houses and put money into it, then that kind of just shows there's not a lot of buyers. So maybe a dip in the market somewhere soon. I have a few real estate buddies that are saying maybe 2023 Q1 Q2 you might see a little bit of dip in the housing market.
I hope so.
Yeah, just because there might be so much supply but not that much demand, where they're gonna have to drop the prices, because like you also said, the interest rates are going up. So if the interest rates are going up, that means you're gonna need to compensate by having costs be a little bit less. Because if you have higher interest, that's going to add on, and you're going to have to counterbalance that with smaller costs, because the longer you have this loan for, you're paying more and more compared to the upfront price should be a little bit lower. Like, it's crazy. There's like a place here in San Diego, right in my neighborhood. It's cost $750,000 and it's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and which is wild. Like I'm not sure who's gonna buy that. I know housing economy is really high up there, but who would really want to pay for that? You can't really even have a family in that kind of a home. You have 2 bedrooms and 1 bath, so you must be like desperate or something.
I agree. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
Morgan, what would you give yourself some advice if you're in your earlier 20s? 3 things that you would tell yourself now, looking back.
Live for yourself and not anyone else, including people that you're in relationships with. If it's meant to be, it will be, but don't pause your life for someone else. I would also say be confident, be sure in yourself. It's not on you, it's in you. And I would tell myself that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. be easy on yourself.
Those are all powerful. They're not only nursing advice tips, but also life advice. Especially that fourth one resonates with me a lot because I have the high achiever mentality. I'm sure you have that too, Pete. We probably don't even know it, but this is why we're doing what we're doing. And you're always trying to build so much and you're never reflecting back like, wow, I've done so much. And sometimes in the micro day to day, you feel like it's not enough. I could have done more. And you beat yourself up for it because you always want to be somewhere else. And it's really just here. Just enjoy the presence, the moment. You already have it. Just breathe it in and enjoy and don't stress yourself out.
I strongly agree with your first one because somebody once told me that if you don't learn how to live with yourself, you're never going to be able to live with somebody else. And that really, that really resonated with me because if you're never comfortable with your true self, then how can you be comfortable with somebody else? You can't, right? Because then you're never yourself. And if you're never yourself, how can that other person always be themselves? If you can't take care of yourself, how can you take care of somebody else? So that's very strong. Another question that we have for you, the last question that we have, is if you could have one cup of coffee with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, so I saw this. I saw this question on there. I was really excited about this question. So I would have coffee with my uncle. So I'll explain the backstory. So everyone usually asks me, well, they usually think that San Diego is my last name, and it's not. Morgan San Diego is actually a joke that came from my family and my uncle. They used to always, make the reference to the cartoon character Carmen San Diego and said, oh, you're always on the go. My uncle always called me Hollywood, and he called me Morgan or Carmen San Diego. So right before I was supposed to finish my Psych and P program, my uncle passed away from a drug overdose. And it really kind of made my path like more clear, and I understood exactly what I wanted to do as far as Psych. And although I don't do it now, most of my work has been in medication-assisted treatment and in Suboxone clinics. And that is probably my favorite setting with my favorite patients. So I feel like being in that role and doing that work has kind of helped me move past that grief that I had. But I would just love to have coffee with him one more time. Well, my family is super close, so we took it kind of hard, but he's part of my why and my purpose, and that's why I told people like I'm never going to change my name from Morgan San Diego. I don't care who said something about it.
One last question is because we spoke to somebody prior to speaking with you. She mentioned that a lot of people use substance abuse and drugs to almost to tap into their past traumas. So do you think, not to get too personal here, but do you think your uncle was going through some stuff that he was using drugs to cope with, or was it more in a sense where it was more like the party drugs that he kind of overdosed on?
I think a lot of people resort to substance use because of trying to deal with traumas or having ineffective coping skills. And I don't think that most patients that I've seen, most patients that have ended up in the hospital or have ended up in treatment facilities, no one kind of starts most substances with the intent to just have a good time. There's a lot of deep-rooted issues that people are struggling from, even a lot of nurses. So I think that with regards to kind of how the patients feel, I don't think that they go in with that thought.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation. We talked about a lot of amazing topics. Thank you for everything that you do.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Morgan.